Hey guys, tonight we're going to row slowly into the quiet world of a Viking fisherman. The mist is low, the fjord is still, and your hands are already cold even though the sun hasn't risen yet. You don't live in a longhouse filled with warriors or a bustling village of traders. You live in a small coastal hamlet, a stone's throw from the edge of the known world, where the sea is your pantry, your calendar, and your fiercest rival. This isn't the Viking life you were promised in pop culture. No axes today, no raids, just fish and a lot of cold fingers. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before the sky begins to shift. There are no clocks, but your bones know the time. The air inside your small turf-roofed home is thick and still trapped between layers of wool blankets, animal pelts, and the faintest trace of last night's fire. Outside, the air is colder than it should be, sharp, even. That particular cold that seeps into your joints before you've even left bed. You sit up, careful not to wake anyone else, though they're likely already stirring too. In a fishing village, no one sleeps through the morning. The door is stiff today. You lift the latch and shoulder it open, and instantly your lungs fill with salt and cold. Mist rolls in from the fjord, curling around the grass-thatched roofs, and creeping low along the worn footpaths. Your boots crunch softly on frostbitten dirt as you head toward the shoreline. Your boat is right where you left it, pulled slightly up the bank with its bow tilted skyward like it's watching the clouds for you. The hull is damp from morning dew, the ropes stiff with chill. You run your hand along the wooden planks, checking for rot, though you've done this so many times that your fingers know the texture of every board. A Viking fisherman doesn't have the luxury of waiting for warm weather. If the sea allows it, you go. You tug the boat toward the water's edge. It grumbles against the rocks, low and heavy like a waking ox. The oars are already inside your own handiwork, carved during long winter nights. They're nicked and slightly warped, but still strong. You pause to stretch your arms, knowing what's coming. Rowing may look simple from a modern treadmill screen, but it's the sort of effort that makes your forearms hum for hours afterward. You push off. The boat rocks gently as you step in, settling your weight evenly. The mist thickens as you pull away from shore. Behind you, your village fades into the white. The only sounds are the rhythmic creak of wood, the lap of water, and the soft grunt of your breath, each time the oar blades dip and rise. Somewhere out in the distance, you hear the bark of a seal. You scan the horizon, but the world is nothing but grey sea and sky melting together with no clear boundary. And yet you know this water better than you know the people 2 villages over. You can feel the subtle tug of the current, like a pulse beneath your feet. Historians still argue whether the typical Norse fisherman ventured out alone or with partners, but today it's just you. Maybe your cousin is sick. Maybe you just needed some silence. You pull your wool cloak tighter and row toward a memory, toward a reef you know like the back of your calloused hand. And then you pause. It's not mystical exactly, but there's a way the sea behaves when the surface changes texture, when the birds hover just so, when the air carries a hint of something oily. You anchor there, gently. No need to test the gods today. Your fingers ache as you reach for the first line. Not a modern rod with fancy lures, no. Just a carved bone hook, a line of twisted horsehair, and your faith in the sea's mercy. You lower it slowly. Feel the line tug just slightly and wait. This is your rhythm. Hours of quiet, of patience. Watching, listening, letting your mind wander while your eyes stay alert. You wonder how old the boat beside yours must be. You wonder if the mist will lift. You wonder if that seal barked at you specifically. A small tug, then another, then a quick, sharp pull. With practiced motion, you haul in the line. A flash of silver, a wriggle, a small herring, slippery and wide-eyed, like it's just as confused about this whole arrangement as you are. You smile quietly triumphant. There will be food today. Of course, this is just the beginning. One fish is never enough. You need dozens, maybe more if your wife plans to trade or if there's a feast coming. But in this moment, sitting on the open water, wrapped in cold and fog, you let yourself feel that small joy, that simple win. You didn't raid a monastery, you didn't discover a new continent, but you caught a fish. And for today, that's enough. The fish is flopping gently in the bottom of your boat, now bumping against the wood like it's trying to have the last word. You nudge it into the woven basket with your foot where it joins two others who share its fate, cold, wide-eyed, and entirely unimpressed. You lean back on the bench, giving your arms a brief moment to rest. The mist is still thick, and everything feels damp, even your eyelashes. Now comes the second most unpleasant part of your morning. The first, of course, was crawling out from under a warm pile of sheep pelt blankets. The second, putting on this outfit. You're still wearing it, of course. You've been wearing it all morning. But now, as the row work is over, and the cold has properly seeped in, you become aware of it. Your tunic itches in 5 different places. It's made of coarse wool dyed with whatever natural plants your household could scrape together. Walnut maybe, or lichens, though most of the colour has long since faded into a sort of northern moss brown. You have 2 tunics. This one is the nicer one. It has fewer mends, and the hole under the left arm is only mildly embarrassing. Under the tunic you're wearing a shirt which once was soft. It was a gift, you think, from your aunt on your naming day. Maybe. It's hard to tell anymore because it has since been patched with fabric from at least 3 other garments, one of which was definitely your grandmother's old apron. Historians still debate whether Viking-age undergarments included linen breeches, or if folks simply braved the elements with toughened thighs and moral strength. You happen to be a breeches man. Thick woolen ones. They're itchy, yes, but less itchy than cold wind on unprotected skin. Pulling your cloak tighter around your shoulders, you flex your hands to return feeling to your fingers. The mittens you brought with you are useless now, soaked through from sea spray. You drape them over the side of the boat, where they flap slightly in the breeze, like sad woolen flags of surrender. Let's not even get started on your shoes. You glance down at the worn leather boots strapped to your feet. They're simple things, soft-soled, wrapped tightly with leather cord, and patched with more layers than a particularly insecure onion. There's a pebble in the left one, and you've decided it's going to live there permanently. Removing it at this point would feel like betrayal. That rock has been through things with you. Somewhere far off, a gull calls out. You look up and spot it gliding in circles. That's a good sign. Gulls love fish, and they're rarely wrong about where the action is. You reach for your net. It's old. All good nets are. They've been mended, recut, reknotted, and inherited through more generations than you can count. You know this one like a friend, where it's fraying, where it sags, where it likes to misbehave. You start preparing it slowly, checking each float, each lead weight, each stretch of horsehair cord. Your fingers move quickly, despite the cold practiced from years of quiet mornings just like this. There's something almost meditative about it. You fall into the rhythm loop, pull, tighten, check. Loop, pull, tighten, check. You hum under your breath, an old tune your grandmother used to sing while weaving. You can't remember the words, but the melody is stitched somewhere behind your ribs. Loop, pull, tighten, check. You pause briefly to stretch your legs and glance at the horizon, or where the horizon would be if the fog wasn't still pretending to be a landscape painter on a budget. You think about heading closer to the reef. Maybe the fish are schooling there today. You row lazily, more for repositioning than travel. The boat glides silently over the surface, and you watch the water ripple beneath the hull. For a moment, you let yourself imagine what it would be like to fish in warmer waters, barefoot, shirtless, maybe even smiling. Then, the wind shifts. Cold, sharp, right down your back. Ah, yes, home sweet home. You toss the net, letting it unfurl like a lazy spiderweb across the water. It sinks with a gentle plunk, dragging your hopes with it. You settle back again, tucking your hands into your armpits for warmth and squinting into the mist. You remember when you were younger, 10, maybe 11, your uncle took you fishing for the first time. You were so excited you forgot to bring bait. He didn't yell. He just handed you a worm from his pocket and said, "This one's smarter than you. You've never forgotten that worm, or the fish it failed to catch. The boat bobs gently. The sea sighs. Somewhere beneath your boots, a cod is probably looking up and wondering if that net is worth the trouble. You think about lunch, about the fire back home, about the fact that you'll have to pull this net back up soon, and it will be heavy and wet and full of either fish or disappointment. And yet, you stay still, because, for all its discomforts, the sea is calm today, the wind is mild, the work is familiar, and your tunic, as itchy as it is, smells faintly like smoke, salt, and the kind of sweat that comes from knowing you've done something useful. The sun hasn't risen much, but you can feel the light growing behind the fog. The mist is thinning slightly. You can just barely make out the silhouette of a fellow fisherman in the distance, rowing slow like you, probably wondering if you're catching more than he is. You smile, just a little, then reach down to check your net. The net resists heavy with the mystery of what lies beneath. You brace your boots against the planks, wrap the coarse rope around one arm and pull. It comes slowly, like lifting a sleepy troll out of bed. Water sloshes, seaweed clings, something wiggles, and then a silvery flash. A good haul, a lucky pocket of the sea. You tug the net up and over the boat's edge, and it slaps down onto the deck with a wet, triumphant splat. Dozens of herring, a few mackerel, one unidentifiable blob that you might try to cook later, or maybe just throw at Bjorn's window for fun. Your fingers move automatically, sorting the catch, flicking seaweed off, untangling heads from tails. Fish scales cling to your wrists like glitter for someone with very specific hobbies. It's tedious, it's cold, and it smells like, well, exactly how you think it smells. But there's something oddly satisfying about the ritual, the slow work, the knowledge that each small silver body means warmth, food trade, tomorrow's comfort secured by today's wet sleeves. You glance at your gut basket. It's woven tightly from reeds, sitting low in the boat, already filled with yesterday's work, gutted fish on one side, heads and bones on the other. It's the Viking version of meal prep, and now it's time to add more. You pull out your gutting knife. It's small, worn, and the handle has a deep notch from that time you slipped and nearly lost a thumb. You keep it sharp out of respect, not just necessity. Dull knives make clumsy work, and clumsy work leads to regret and tetanus, probably, though you wouldn't call it that. You begin cleaning the fish one by one. Slice, scrape, flick. The guts land with little wet plops in the basket. You're already coated in brine, fish oil, and the kind of smell that doesn't come out no matter how hard you scrub with lye soap or snow. Your fingers have long since stopped protesting. They understand their job. Historians still argue whether Viking fishermen salted their catch at sea or brought it home fresh, but you do a little of both depending on the wind, the tide, and whether your cousin borrowed the salt barrel again and forgot to return it. Again. A gust of wind lifts your hair as you work, and you squint toward the coastline. The outline of the village is barely visible now, but you can just make out the smoke from morning fires curling into the grey sky. Somewhere, in one of those houses, someone's already baking flatbread, and the idea of it makes your stomach growl rude, considering you're up to your elbows in fish intestines. You sit back for a moment, stretching your sore back. The boat rocks gently beneath you. Your basket is nearly full, and so are your sleeves. You glance down at your tunic. It now bears an abstract pattern of fish scales, sea water, and a streak of something brownish red that you hope came from a particularly enthusiastic mackerel and not your own forearm. You sigh contentedly. Fishing isn't glamorous. No one's going to sing ballads about this moment. No scold will recite verses about Olaf the gut-covered. But in its own way, this is a kind of heroism, quiet, messy, and vital. You scrape the last of the scales off your palm and toss one curious, staring fish head into the fjord with a flick. It bobs once, then vanishes. Somewhere a gull shrieks in delight. Probably the same one from earlier. You've never liked that gull. It has judgmental energy. You coil your net carefully and stow it beneath the bench, covering it with an oilskin cloth that still smells faintly of fermented shark, a scent that once introduced to a boat will outlive you and your grandchildren. The tide has shifted slightly. You feel it before you see it. The water has that subtle pull, that lulling tug that lets you know it's time to head in. You stow the last fish, wipe your knife on your breeches with absolutely no concern for hygiene, and grab your oars. Rowing home is always slower. Your arms are tired. The boat is heavier. Your stomach is making noises that might be Norse for treason. But the fog has lifted enough now for sunlight to creep in around the edges. It glints off, the fish scales off your oar, blades off your very soul. Probably. You let the boat drift for a moment, letting your shoulders rest. You pass a seal again, maybe the same one, maybe not. He watches you lazily, unimpressed by your efforts. You nod respectfully. Seals, after all, are the original fishermen, and they do it with less equipment and more charm. As the shoreline draws near you, catch sight of other boats, some pulling in, some heading out, one clearly being rowed in circles by a man too proud to admit he's lost his paddle. You consider helping, then you consider your aching arms. He'll figure it out. The boat slides into the shallows with a soft hiss of sand and water. You step out, boots squelching, and begin hauling the vessel up the bank with slow, practiced effort. The basket of fish sloshes with each tug, reminding you that the day's work isn't over yet. But for now, there's fire, and flatbread, and possibly a nap. You hoist the basket onto your shoulder and trudge toward the smell of wood smoke and boiled porridge, leaving a trail of damp footprints, fish scales, and at least 3 curious cats in your wake. Your legs ache by the time you reach the edge of the village, and the weight of the fish basket has pressed a deep groove into your shoulder. You switch sides halfway up the slope, grunting just loud enough for the passing children to hear in hopes they'll offer to help. They don't. They never do. They're too busy poking a frozen puddle with sticks and arguing about whether Thor or Loki invented thunder. You pass the same crooked fence that leans a little farther each year, the same goat chewing something it absolutely should not be chewing, and the same stack of firewood that's mysteriously smaller than it was yesterday. You suspect your neighbour Hraw, who always looks too warm for someone who claims to never chop wood on days that end in dag. As you step inside your home, you're hit with a wave of smells, peat smoke, hot stones, and that ever-present note of slightly damp wool. The hearth is glowing, not roaring exactly, but doing its best. Your wife stands by the stove, stirring something thick in a clay pot. She glances at your fish basket and nods approvingly. That's as close to praise as it gets before breakfast. You set the basket down on the packed earth floor and begin the delicate art of removing your outer layer without getting fish goo on the furniture, which consists of 2 stools and a bench made from the remnants of a shipwreck. One stool is broken. You've promised to fix it. For 6 months now. Your wife hands you a wooden bowl of porridge without a word. It's lukewarm. The consistency is somewhere between oatmeal and clay, and it smells faintly of onions. You eat it anyway. Hunger doesn't care about texture. Besides, she's watching. You give a small appreciative grunt, which she accepts with a raised eyebrow, and another ladleful dumped into your bowl. It's her way of saying she loves you. The family goat, for reasons unknown to science or the gods, has somehow gotten back inside. It stares at you from the corner like it knows what you did last midsummer. You stare back. The goat wins. You slide your bowl slightly away just in case it makes a move. Historians still argue whether Viking households commonly kept livestock indoors or only in especially harsh winters. But in your experience, the goat keeps letting itself in, and no one has the heart to stop it. You finish your meal in silence, the kind that isn't awkward, just lived in. The fire crackles. Someone outside yells about turnips. Your stomach is full, or at least no longer actively complaining. You rinse your bowl with a splash of water from the basin, which is exactly as cold as you'd expect, a wooden bucket in a northern hut to be. Then it's back outside with the fish. The sun has climbed just high enough to cast long shadows on the frost-covered ground. You take the basket around the side of the house to your little working space, a rough table, a few hooks, and a stack of wooden trays for drying. One by one you lay the fish out, sorting them by size and mood. Some go to trade, some for supper. A few unlucky ones will be smoked, the rest will be fermented, for reasons no one quite understands, least of all your stomach. You reach for your fish press, essentially 2 planks and some rocks, and begin the slow process of squishing the life out of dinner. It's a messy business, and it attracts attention. Your neighbor Hror appears like mold or bad poetry just when you least need him. He leans over the fence, eyes the fish, and delivers his daily philosophical observation. "Not much herring this year." You nod. He spits. A pause. "Looks like you've got enough for 2 households." You smile politely and reposition the rocks on your fish press in a way that suggests you could crush a melon with them if required. He wanders off eventually, muttering something about damp seasons and what the gods owe him. You return to your work, satisfied that no actual favors were requested. As you clean the last of the fish goo from your sleeves, most of the fish goo, you step back and take in your little operation. It's not elegant, it's not famous, but it works, and tomorrow it'll start all over again. Inside, your wife has started kneading dough. You can hear the rhythmic thump of her fists against the board. You'll likely be asked to chop more firewood soon, or fix that stool, or deal with the goat again, but for now, you have a moment of peace. You sit on the bench, stretch your legs, and watch your breath fog in the morning light. A fishy scent clings to your tunic. A seagull lands nearby with the audacity of a king, and your stomach, against all odds, wonders when lunch might be ready. The fish are drying, the hearth is humming, and the day is finally finding its rhythm, that gentle, slightly damp rhythm that defines life in your little Viking village. You've settled on the bench beside your house, the sun still low enough to cast shadows that make everything look slightly more dramatic than it really is. You rest your elbows on your knees, watching your wife shape dough into little flat circles. She's using the good flour today, or at least the flour that hasn't had too many bugs in it recently. You catch her eye. She doesn't say anything, but her brow arches in that subtle way that says, "Don't even think about eating one raw again." You offer an innocent smile, which fools no one. The village around you is waking up properly now. Children chasing chickens, someone yelling about a missing boot, and smoke curling out of every chimney. You hear the sharp crack of a log splitting in the distance, and feel momentarily guilty for not splitting any of your own. That feeling passes quickly. With nothing urgent demanding your attention, you decide to check on your tools. They're stored in a small lean-to behind your house, along with some warped shields, a broken sled, and a mysterious barrel you've been meaning to open since last autumn. You lift the latch and squint into the dimness. Your gutting knife is clean and hanging on its hook. The extra nets are drying in loose coils, still smelling faintly of old seaweed and the hopes of last year's fishing season. You pick up your wood-handled awl used for mending and run your thumb along the smooth edge. Useful, reliable, like most things you own. Not flashy. Just enough. You hear a soft rustle and turn. One of your chickens is inside the lean-to again, investigating the barrel. This chicken, which your children have named Tyr, seems convinced that all barrels contain secrets. You gently shoo it out with your foot and make a mental note to secure the door better. You won't follow through on that note. Back outside, you notice a new sound. Hooves. The small coastal path beyond the village is being tested by a trader's cart, its wheels creaking under the weight of, hopefully, something more exciting than sacks of turnips. The driver nods at you as he passes. You nod back the international Viking signal, for I acknowledge your existence, but am currently emotionally unavailable. You wander toward the shoreline again, needing to stretch your legs and avoid further domestic chores. As you pass by Hror's house, you hear him arguing with his son over the proper way to dry a sheepskin. You speed up slightly. You've heard that debate before. It involves shouting contradictory weather predictions and at least one dramatic storm reference. Down by the beach, the tide has pulled out farther than usual. You spot little tide pools glistening in the morning light, tiny worlds filled with crabs, snails, and the occasional sea cucumber that looks far too confident. You squat beside one and watch a crab scuttle sideways, bump into a rock, and then pretend it meant to do that. It reminds you of your cousin Bjorn. You chuckle quietly and pick up a small piece of driftwood, whittled smooth by years of salt water and sun. You turn it over in your hands. It could become a spoon, or part of a handle. Or more likely, it'll just sit beside your fire for the next 6 months while you decide. As you walk back toward the village, you pause at the drying racks where your fish now hang. Gulls have gathered nearby, eyeing your bounty with greedy little eyes. You wave your arms and shout something firm and Vikingish. They flutter off offended. One poops on a rock in protest. Historians still argue whether Vikings used scarecrows or other deterrents for birds, or simply yelled at them until their voices gave out. You favor the yelling approach. It feels more personal. You gather some of the dried fish into a basket for trade and tuck the rest inside the shed. It's nearly midday now, and your stomach reminds you again that porridge, while functional, was not emotionally satisfying. Back inside the house, the bread is ready. Your wife sets 2 flat loaves on the wooden board near the hearth. You break one in half, the crust crackling slightly, and the smell of warm flour filling the room. It's basic, dense, but it's good. You eat in grateful silence. The goat watches, chewing something you really hope isn't the hem of your tunic. Later, you lie down on the bench beside the hearth, not for sleep yet, just to close your eyes. The fire crackles beside you, warm and steady. Your hands still smell faintly of fish, smoke, and salt, but the bench is worn in all the right places. The pillow is a bundled fur that's softer than it looks. Outside, someone is singing a folk tune slightly off-key. You recognize the melody. It's about a girl who turned into a seal after refusing to marry a fisherman. You hum along. The goat snorts. The midday warmth has begun to fade. Though warmth is a generous term in your part of the world, really it's more of a slightly less sharp chill, like when your bathwater cools from scalding to survivable. Still, the hearth glows softly behind you, and your belly is full of bread, which gives you the courage to face the afternoon's next challenge. Navigating the marketplace. You grab the trade basket, the one that doesn't wobble, and set off down the narrow, well-trodden path that winds between turf-roofed homes. Smoke drifts lazily overhead. Children play some chaotic version of tag that involves sticks, yelling, and one extremely fast dog. You pass the smithy first. It smells of iron and ambition. The blacksmith's apprentice is fanning the coals while trying not to look like he's crying from the smoke. You give him a nod, and he returns a soot-smudged smile that says, "I'm fine. This is fine. Please send help." Farther along, you reach the open market square, or what passes for one. It's really just a clearing where traders, gossipers, and wandering chickens collide like badly planned weather. A few plank tables are laid out with goods. Salted fish, not yours, thankfully carved bowls, coarse cloth, and one mysterious stall offering potions in bottles that smell suspiciously like vinegar and regret. You weave your way through the crowd, clutching your basket like it owes you money. A woman with impressive eyebrows offers you 3 onions for a fish. You counter with 2 onions and a stale pastry. She squints at you. A baby cries in the background. A chicken flaps past. You both agree on 2 onions and half the pastry. A win. Next, you approach the egg lady. She's always been a tough negotiator. Once she convinced your cousin to trade an entire smoked trout for a single egg with strong spiritual energy. No one's quite sure what happened to him afterward, but he won't eat eggs anymore. You hold up a dried mackerel. She eyes it like it just insulted her family. You add a second one. She narrows her eyes. Finally, you offer a third, and she hands over a small bundle of eggs with a grunt that could mean thank you, or you got lucky. Either way, you nod respectfully and retreat. Historians still argue whether Viking marketplaces operated with fixed pricing or pure haggling, but from your experience it's roughly 40% goods, 30% charm, and 30% emotional endurance. You trade the rest of your fish for barley flour, a small bundle of firewood, and what is either a decorative comb or an unusually confident spoon. It's carved from bone, and the trader claims it's from a walrus. You think it might be goat. You don't argue. Sometimes it's best to let the bone be mysterious. You're just about to leave when you hear your name called too loudly, too enthusiastically. It's Bjorn. You turn. He's waving both arms, wearing a tunic that once belonged to your uncle. and still fits like a borrowed potato sack. He's carrying something in a cloth bundle and grinning like he just caught Thor napping. "Guess what I got?" he bellows. You eye the cloth. "Is it cursed?" you ask cautiously. "No," he says slightly too quickly. He unwraps the bundle with the flair of a magician. Inside, a large fermented shark head glistening and proud of itself. "Limited supply," he says, as if this is a good thing. You stare. "Why?" He shrugs. "Tradition." And it clears the sinuses. Which it absolutely does. The smell hits you like an old sock soaked in betrayal and sealed in a barrel. You take an instinctive step back. The goat would run if it were here. You politely decline the offer of a sample, which Bjorn seems relieved about. "More for me," he says, wrapping it up again and storing it under his arm like it's a newborn that smells like fish and foot. You part ways with a slap on the shoulder and a vague promise to visit soon, which you both understand is not legally binding. As you make your way back home, your basket heavier with bartered goods, and your nose still tingling from the shark, you reflect on the nature of markets. They aren't just about fish and flour. They're about stories, eye rolls, and old rivalries. They're about seeing who's still around, who's still stubborn, and who's accidentally bought something pickled and unlabeled again. You cross back over the muddy path toward your house boots squishing in familiar puddles. The wind picks up slightly, tugging at your cloak. The goat greets you at the door. You pretend not to see it chew on your wife's spare shoe. You place your goods near the hearth, dust off your shoulders and stretch. Your wife asks how the market went. You say, traded for eggs, flour, and something with spiritual energy. She nods. Good day then. You think about adding the part with the shark, then decide to let that mystery remain safely in Bjorn's hands. The wind shifts slightly as the sun begins its long, slow descent across the sky. In the north, that doesn't necessarily mean darkness is coming anytime soon. It just means the shadows get longer and the light gets a little more sentimental, like even the sun is thinking about home and hot soup. You finish storing the day's trade items inside the house, eggs cradled gently in a cloth-lined basket, the flour carefully sealed against damp, and the bone spoon placed on the shelf of dubious tools right next to the rock you once tried to turn into a whetstone. It didn't work, but now it holds down recipes, or at least drawings of fish your children insist are cooking instructions. With the practical tasks done and your limbs already sore from rowing, gutting, and enduring a surprise fermented shark encounter, you settle into your favorite early afternoon routine, doing very little. You ease yourself onto the bench by the hearth, tilting your head back against the wooden wall. The fire still crackles low, and the air inside is warm, still laced with the scent of baked bread and damp wool. Your wife is spinning flax thread nearby the drop spindle, whirring gently like a slow-moving top. She hums something tuneless, and you find yourself breathing in rhythm with the spin. In this quiet moment, you feel it, a rare softness, a stillness so complete it almost hums in your bones. This is when you nap. You don't plan it. No Viking fisherman ever plans to nap. You simply drift. One moment you're watching the spindle twirl. The next your head is tipping forward, your neck jerking slightly. Your eyes blur. Your thoughts stretch like softened dough. You dream without sleeping. There's an odd little theory still argued about by modern scholars that early medieval folks didn't sleep in one long stretch. They had first sleep and second sleep with a space in between for thinking, praying, or more often just lying quietly in the dark, pretending not to hear the goat scratching at the wall. You suspect this theory holds some truth, because even now, in the middle of the day, as you rest in the warmth of the fire, you aren't unconscious. Just still, quiet, present. A log shifts in the hearth with a crack. You don't open your eyes. Your wife has moved on to a new song, something with a rhythm you remember from your grandmother's lullabies. The spindle continues its hypnotic dance, spinning the day into thread. Outside, you can hear faint voices, children playing, someone hammering something that probably shouldn't be hammered. A rooster crows at absolutely nothing. All of it melts into the same sleepy soundtrack of the afternoon. You shift slightly, just enough to relieve the pressure on your lower back. The bench creaks. The goats bleat outside. You let your head rest back again, letting your mind wander. You think about your nets. You think about how long it's been since you sharpened your axe. You think about that one fish you tossed back this morning, the one with the weird mark on its side, and wonder if it's telling its friends an exaggerated version of the encounter. Then you think about nothing, gloriously fully nothing. You float in the glow of the hearth and the soft hush of woolen sounds. Your wife clears her throat gently, and you know what that means. Time to gather firewood. You grunt a protest, a sigh, an acknowledgement of fate. She doesn't even look up. You rise slowly, knees popping just loud enough to remind you that you're not 20 anymore. You stretch your arms, shake off the haze, and reach for your cloak. The firewood pile is just beyond the edge of the village, tucked under a rocky outcrop where the snow doesn't gather. As you step outside, the sky greets you with soft light and colder air. The warmth of the hearth fades quickly from your skin, replaced by the crisp breath of the fjord. You walk the narrow path toward the trees, passing the neighbor's sheep pen, where a lamb bleats like it's just realized life is unfair. The forest here isn't vast, just a fringe of pines and birch that cling to the rocky hillsides like stubborn hairs. The ground crunches beneath your boots, twigs and frost crackling in tandem. You reach the pile and begin sorting. You choose dry pieces, thick, knotty ones for long burns, thin twigs for kindling. Each log tells its own story, scars, sap marks, old axe cuts. You remember chopping some of them months ago, cursing the rain and your back in equal measure. As you stack the bundle in your arms, you catch sight of something odd wedged between the logs. A tiny wooden carving barely longer than your thumb. A horse maybe, or a dog. Someone's child must have left it here during a game or an offering. You smile, pocket it, and resolve to give it to the next child who trips over your boots. You turn back toward the village, the firewood pressing into your side, your breath fogging in front of you. The wind picks up, carrying with it the scent of wood smoke, seaweed, and someone's burned stew. Home is waiting. So is the hearth. And probably the goat. The goat greets you at the door again. You don't know how it got back inside. You were just in the house 10 minutes ago, and you're almost certain you latched the door. And yet here it is, perched on the bench like a tiny judgmental chieftain. Its eyes meet yours, and you know it has no intention of moving. You sigh and set the firewood down beside the hearth. Your wife glances up from her spinning. She doesn't say anything, just nods slightly toward the door in that universal language of, your goat, your problem. You try logic. Out you tell the goat, the outside is where grass is, not here. The goat blinks slowly, chewing something. You hope it's not your sock. Eventually, with the power of mild shoving and firm muttering, you manage to herd the creature back into the yard. It walks off like it was planning to leave anyway. You shut the door firmly this time and wedge a stick under the latch. Another small victory. You tend the fire, feeding it with the new logs, poking the coals until the warmth returns to the stones and your fingertips. The hearth crackles and breathes alive in its own way. There's something deeply satisfying about this moment. Hearth-tended goat, banished temporarily, chores mostly done. You settle again on the bench, watching your wife work. The rhythm of her hands and spindle is hypnotic, and you find yourself lulled into that quiet, contented state again. Not sleep exactly, more like restful awareness. The kind that only comes when the world outside is cold and the inside is exactly warm enough. Eventually, she stops spinning and stretches, cracking her knuckles. She looks toward the window and says, "You should check on the shark." You blink. Bjorn's shark. She raises an eyebrow. "No, your shark." You groan. "Right. The one you agreed to ferment just once to prove it wasn't that bad." A scientific experiment. A rite of passage. A mistake. You pull on your cloak and brace yourself. The shark is buried outside under a pile of stones near the edge of the village, where the wind always blows hardest and the smell has a better chance of escaping into the ether. The process you once insisted to your wife was perfectly traditional. You cut the meat into slabs, buried it deep under gravel and left it to ferment for several weeks. In theory, the cold and pressure would drive out the toxins and create something edible. In reality, it has likely created a crime against nature. As you approach the burial spot, your nose twitches. The wind has shifted. There's a faint hint of ammonia in the air. You wonder if that's a good sign. Probably not. You remove the rocks slowly, cautiously, like you're disarming something ancient and angry. The shark is still there. Technically. You crouch beside the pit and poke the package with a stick. It jiggles. You wrinkle your nose. This was your idea. You peel back the top cloth, wincing. The smell is assertive. It reaches into your throat and gives it a firm handshake. Your eyes water slightly. You stand up quickly and take a long step back. Somewhere behind you, someone coughs. You turn and see Hraw standing a few paces away, holding a mug and watching you with morbid fascination. "Is it ready?" he asks, eyes twinkling with mischief. You glance back at the pit. "Depends what you mean by ready." "Brass." He chuckles. "Smells like success." "Smells like vengeance," you mutter. Still, you know what comes next. The community will expect a sample. You'll have to slice it, air it out, and serve it with bread, or something equally bland to dull the flavour. And you'll have to pretend it's fine, because admitting it tastes like fermented boot water would give Bjorn a decade of teasing rights. Historians still argue whether fermented shark was widely consumed or reserved for ceremonies and bravely foolish uncles. Either way, it's on your to-do list now. You cover the pit again, replacing the rocks carefully, like sealing away an ancient evil. As you walk back to the house, your eyes still watering slightly, you resolve to never again listen to Bjorn when he uses the phrase, "This'll be a good story." Back inside, your wife has set out dinner. Boiled barley turnips, and a small wedge of cheese that's seen better days. She watches you sit down, notes your expression, and slides a mug of something warm toward you. "You touched it, didn't you?" she asks. You nod. She sighs. "You'll never get that smell out of your fingers." You eat in comfortable silence. Outside, the wind howls lightly, tugging at the shutters. The goat bleats. You ignore it. The fire is warm. The food is filling. The shark is back in its pit. All in all, you think this has been a productive afternoon. You wake the next morning with the strange certainty that something is off. Not wrong exactly, just different. The air feels heavier. The light filtering through the shuttered window carries a bluish hue, and your joints ache in a very specific atmospheric way. You roll over on your straw-stuffed mattress and listen. The goat is unusually quiet. That's either a good sign or a deeply ominous one. The wind is absent, replaced by a low hum, barely perceptible, like the fjord is murmuring secrets in its sleep. You sit up and stretch your back, cracking like firewood. Your tunic has tangled itself in a knot during the night. You peel it off, inspect it for goat teeth, and pull on your usual layers with the enthusiasm of someone preparing for mild battle. As you step outside, the sky confirms your suspicions. It's whale weather. You've seen it before. The mist hangs heavier than usual, the birds fly lower, and the sea carries that sharp, briny scent with an edge of iron. You scan the coastline instinctively. Nothing yet, but your bones rarely lie, and neither does the sea. You make your way toward the beach past, neighbours adjusting their fishing nets and grumbling about the damp. Bjorn passes you going the other way, shirt half-buttoned and carrying what appears to be an oar, a loaf of bread, and a child's toy boat. "Whale weather," you both mutter at the same time, then nod gravely, as if you've spoken a profound truth. You keep walking. Down at the shoreline, the mist clings to the rocks like wet wool. The tide is pulling in harder than usual, tugging at the kelp and dragging foam across the sand in long, eerie streaks. You pause to scan the horizon, nothing but fog and low cloud. Still, the air vibrates with potential. Whales aren't frequent visitors, but they do come. Occasionally, a pod will swim into the fjord, their great bodies slicing through the water like living mountains. And more rarely still, one will beach itself. No one knows exactly why. Some say the gods call them, others blame the mist. Hror once claimed they followed the smell of turnips, but no one listens to Hror after mead anymore. You remember the last time years ago now. A young bull washed up just north of the village. The entire hamlet came to help. It was half miracle, half chaos. You spent hours slicing blubber, trying not to get crushed under sheer weight and slippery sea meat. The oil fed lamps for a full year. The meat was acquired taste. You glance behind you. Already, word is spreading. 2 boys are running up the path, shouting something you can't quite hear. A few women have gathered near the drying racks, pointing toward the fog. Even the goat looks concerned, which is rare for a creature so emotionally opaque. You begin walking north, the direction the current pulls hardest. Your boots slip slightly on the wet stones, but you know the way. This path has been worn down by centuries of fishermen footsteps lined with driftwood and seagull tracks. The air grows colder as you walk, and the mist thickens, curling low around your legs. As you crest a rise in the land, you hear it, a deep, rhythmic sound like a drumbeat slowed down to the tempo of glaciers. Whale breath. You hurry now, your legs protesting the incline. Cresting the final dune, you stop. There just offshore is a massive barnacle speckled back, breaching the surface. The whale exhales and a misty spout shoots skyward before disappearing into the heavy air. It lingers for a moment, then dives, slow, deliberate, ancient. You exhale slowly. For a moment, it's just you and the sea. You forget the itchy tunic, the cold, even the goat. You are nothing but breath and salt and awe. Don't fall in, says a voice beside you. Bjorn. He's carrying a rope now. No one asked him to, but he clearly feels it's important. You both watch as the whale resurfaces closer this time. Not beached, not struggling, just there. Must be a good omen, Bjorn mutters. Historians still argue whether whales were considered sacred in Norse belief, or simply giant meat gods sent by the sea. Some sagas speak of sea beasts as messengers, others as monsters. Either way, they made an impression. You both stand in silence, watching the creature drift lazily through the water barnacles, glinting like frost. After a few minutes, it dives again, its massive tail lifting above the surface, then disappearing with a whispering splash. You and Bjorn glance at each other. No words needed. You turn back toward the village. As you walk, you notice how the mist is lifting slightly, the sun beginning to push its way through the clouds. The boys are still running around, reenacting the whale sighting with increasingly implausible details. Someone will tell the tale differently by evening. By next week, the whale will have sung a song. By next winter, it may have delivered a prophecy. But for now, it was just a quiet moment. A massive creature floating in the morning stillness, reminding you that even in a life filled with fish guts, wet socks, and argumentative goats, some things remain mysterious, beautiful, and untouched. Evening comes quietly, as it often does in the north, not with a dramatic sunset, but with a gradual bluing of everything. The light softens, the wind calms, and the world takes on the hush of a village settling in for the night. Fires are lit, doors are bolted. Chickens argue briefly, then go still. You're back at home, perched on the bench near the hearth, chewing on a piece of dried cod that has the texture of aged rope and the flavor of salted perseverance. It's not dinner, exactly more of a mouth occupation while waiting for stew. Your wife is stirring something in the pot. From the scent you suspect turnips are involved, possibly rutabagas, possibly vengeance. To pass the time, and to distract yourself from the slight crunch in your last bite. Fish scale, probably you decide to entertain the children with a story. They gather around the hearth, bundled in wool and curiosity, eyes wide and knees dirty. Even the goat wanders close because no one controls the goat, not even bedtime. You begin with a favourite. The Tale of Bjorn and the Very Angry Monk. The kids gasp. They love this one. It starts with Bjorn, young, bold, and full of poor decisions, sailing to a foreign shore with dreams of treasure. What he finds instead is a monastery, quiet and peaceful, with monks who mind their own business and possess a frankly unreasonable number of silver goblets. Bjorn, being Bjorn, attempts to liberate one of these goblets under the cover of night. What he does not account for is that one of the monks is enormous, bald, and apparently trained in the fine art of wrestling walruses. You wave your hands dramatically as you describe the ensuing chase. Bjorn leaping over pews, the monk swinging a candlestick like a warhammer, and a goat. Yes, there was a goat that bit someone's boot and refused to let go. The kids erupt with laughter. Even your wife chuckles quietly while stirring. You embellish slightly. Perhaps the monk could breathe fire, and Bjorn escaped using a barrel like a boat. The children eat it up. Accuracy has its place. That place is not around the evening hearth. Historians still argue whether Viking raiders exaggerated their tales or genuinely believed every monk they met had supernatural strength. Based on your story tonight, the tradition of slightly improved history lives on. As the tale winds down, you add a solemn moral, something vague about respecting others and never stealing goblets from large monks. The kids nod, satisfied. The goat snorts, unimpressed. Dinner is served. The stew is thick, mostly root vegetables with something chewy that you choose not to investigate further. You eat gratefully warmed from the inside out. After the meal, you help clean up, wiping bowls, stacking wooden spoons, pretending not to notice the goat licking the bench. The hearth is still warm, but the fire needs feeding. You add a log and poke the embers until they glow. Outside, the wind picks up again, soft and steady. A light rain begins to fall, pattering against the turf roof in a rhythm that makes everyone a little sleepier. You settle back into your seat this time, with a mug of warm mead. Not strong, just enough to coax the tension out of your shoulders. You sip slowly, listening to your wife hum as she folds blankets. One of the children snores softly, curled up near the hearth. This is the part of the day that feels richest. No rush, no fish guts, just the soft breathing of family, the crackle of fire, and the gentle rhythm of the wind and rain outside. You glance toward the shelf above the hearth. There, tucked between a few carved trinkets and an old broken lantern, sits a smooth piece of driftwood, shaped vaguely like a whale. You found it years ago after that first sighting. You've kept it ever since. A reminder of stillness, of the sea, of mystery. The rain deepens, steady and soothing. You pull a blanket across your lap, the wool still warm from the fire. Your eyes grow heavier, and your breath slows to match the rhythm of the weather. One of the children stirs, mumbles something about Bjorn, and a dragon monk then settles again. You smile, eyes half closed. The fire crackles. The goat bleats once softly as if agreeing with the story. And outside in the distance, the fjord sighs beneath the falling rain. Morning again, but softer this time. No sharp chill biting at your nose. No frantic wind clawing at the shutters. Just a kind of quiet greyness, like the world forgot to wake up fully. You rise slowly, joints creaking, muscles still reluctant after yesterday's shark encounter and whale pursuit. The hearth has gone out. The goat thankfully has not yet made a reappearance. You throw on your tunic, yes, the itchy one still suspiciously damp in one shoulder, and lace up your boots while muttering your daily plea for them to hold together just one more day. They don't respond, but you take their silence as agreement. Your wife is already up, humming softly while twisting flax thread onto the spindle. You offer a sleepy nod and receive a slight smile, in return the Viking version of a loving embrace before caffeine. You scoop a ladle of thin porridge from the pot dunk in a crust of yesterday's bread and chew slowly as your mind drifts. She's updating you now about your cousin's broken fence, the neighbour who claims he saw a wolf again, and the child who got his hand stuck in a turnip jar. You nod dutifully, contributing a grunt here and there. She pauses. Are you even listening? You blink. Absolutely. Something about a haunted turnip. She raises an eyebrow but lets it go. You've learned to survive marriage through selective comprehension and acts of mild penance, like repairing that one stool you've been pretending not to notice for several moons. You sigh and finally pick it up. It's sitting in the corner like a reminder of your own procrastination, the back leg wobbly and the seat split. You turn it over, inspecting it, like it's a battlefield injury. This will require more than just string and hope. You shuffle out to your shed to retrieve tools. A wedge, some pegs, a hammer that's been mistaken for a soup ladle more than once. The shed smells of pine shavings, damp earth, and male guilt. You settle on a stool of your own, slightly sturdier, and begin the process. The goats bleat somewhere nearby. You freeze. You left the latch open. A pause. Silence. Then the faint sound of something wooden being knocked over inside the house. You sprint. Inside, the scene is familiar. A goat on the bench, its front hooves dangerously close to your dinner bowl, and your wife standing frozen mid-spin with an expression of betrayal. You sigh, grab the goat by the horns, and guide it out like a poorly behaved dinner guest. Once outside, you tie the latch with a length of fishing line. Not elegant, but effective. You glare at the goat. It blinks, then starts chewing your fishing net. You decide to let it win just this once. Back inside, you return to the stool. Your wife has already resumed spinning, choosing not to comment. You resume repairing, pretending this is your plan all along. As you drive the first peg into place, you remember something your father once told you. Fixing a stool is like fishing. It takes patience, and sometimes you end up with splinters. You didn't understand it then. You still don't. But it sounds wise. The children wander in, one carrying a carved wooden fish, the other trailing mud. They sit nearby, watching your repair work with mild interest and occasional heckling. Is it still a stool if it only has 3 legs? Technically, yes. Then why are you sweating? You focus harder on your hammering and less on your parenting. By midday, the stool stands again, slightly crooked but functional. You test it with your full weight. It creaks like a nervous storyteller, but it holds. You present it to your wife with a flourish. She sits carefully, raises her eyebrows at the tiny lean, and then nods. It's acceptable. Victory. Historians still argue whether Viking domestic life had clearly defined roles or a more collaborative rhythm, but in your household, carpentry is a humble path to redemption. The rest of the afternoon passes in quiet tasks, folding, sharpening, sweeping, occasionally yelling at the goat from a window. You mend a tear in your boot with a needle so blunt it should qualify as a weapon. You gather wood chips for the hearth. You snack on dried apple slices that taste more like bark than fruit. Eventually, the sun slips low again, casting long amber streaks across the floor. Dinner is simple. Barley soup and something pickled you didn't ask about. The family gathers, eating in silence, punctuated by chewing and the occasional spoon drop. Afterwards, your wife returns to her spinning, and you pretend to read a carved runestone that's mostly decorative. The children chase each other in circles until exhaustion defeats them. You take a deep breath, stretching your legs by the hearth. You think again about the stool. You think about how you fixed it finally. You think about how long it'll hold. A week, a month. You don't know, but for now it stands. And that's enough. The fire dims into a warm, pulsing glow. The shadows grow deeper, longer. The air inside your home takes on that earthy scent of wool, wood smoke, and a hint of turnip from dinner. Not bad, just present. You take a seat on the now repaired stool, which groans under your weight, like it's still a little unsure of your carpentry skills. Your wife glances over and raises an eyebrow again. The stool doesn't collapse. She nods. Official approval. It's time for the evening routine. You reach for the small wooden comb tucked into the basket near the hearth. Not for your hair, though it could probably use a battle or two, but for something more urgent. Lice patrol. Yes, this is your life now. You begin with your beard. It's long, slightly tangled, and smells vaguely of salt and whatever herb your wife used last week to ward off spirits or mice or maybe just bad dreams. You forgot to ask. The scent is sharp and oddly comforting, like old sage mixed with dried cod. You run the comb through, slowly pulling at small knots. Occasionally, you pause to inspect something. Usually it's just a bit of dried seaweed or a piece of old bread crust. Once it was a tiny fish scale. How it got there, no one knows. Possibly a gift. Possibly a warning. The goat watches you from the doorway. Somehow it's managed to wedge half its face through a gap in the doorframe. Its expression says, "You forgot to comb me." You ignore it. You move on to the back of your neck, tilting your head and catching glimpses of your own reflection in the polished bronze dish hung by the wall. You look tired, but the kind of tired that feels earned, weather-worn, sea-bent and moderately infested. Lice were not a source of shame in your world. They were simply a fact of life. Historians have even unearthed beautifully carved lice combs from Viking settlements, complete with decorative runes. It seems no civilization, no matter how fierce or poetic, has ever escaped the humbling task of nit removal. You finish with a final comb through, flicking the teeth clean into the fire with a satisfying snap. Sparks flutter upward, like tiny fleeing spirits. You lean back, beard slightly fluffed, feeling vaguely regal. "Your turn," your wife says, already holding out her own comb. You sigh but scoot over. She sits behind you and begins the same process, slow, methodical, slightly judgmental. Her fingers are warm. Her nails scrape your scalp just enough to remind you you're alive. You close your eyes and let yourself drift. She works in silence, but you know what she's thinking. That you should oil your beard more often. That you should stop using the bone spoon to dig in the garden. That you need to stop keeping secrets from her like the actual contents of Bjorn's shark bundle. You won't, of course, but it's nice to imagine a cleaner, better version of yourself under all this wool and stubble. After the combing comes the beard braiding. Not full ceremonial braids, just a couple of neat ties to keep the strands out of your soup. She sections the hair with practiced fingers, tying small leather cords near the ends. One side is always tighter than the other. You suspect she does it on purpose. "There," she says, "now you look less like a drowned fisherman and more like a prepared drowned fisherman." You thank her with a nod and a grunt. She accepts this with grace. The children have begun their own grooming rituals, which mostly involve slapping each other with wet cloths and giggling about armpits. You let them be. Cleanish is close enough at this hour. Eventually the combs are set aside, the braids tightened, and the blankets pulled out. The hearth dims further. The fire crackles softly, like it too is brushing out its beard and settling in for the night. You crawl under your furs, stretching your legs out until your toes bump the end of the bed frame. Your muscles sigh. Your back whispers complaints. Your eyes grow heavy. Outside, the wind returns gentler now, brushing along the roof like a lullaby. You hear the rustle of seagrass, the faint lapping of water, the sound of someone somewhere trying to wrangle a chicken past its bedtime. You let it all wash over you. Your beard is neat. Your lice are fewer. Your stool stands strong. Life is good, or good enough. You fall asleep wondering if whales ever get lice. You dream of fish, of course you do. Fat cod with knowing eyes, herring dancing in circles, a giant mackerel wearing a crown. The kind of dreams that make sense only in the minutes between real sleep and waking, like your brain is poking around the pantry and just making do with what's left. When you wake, the house is still dark, but the glow from the hearth tells you someone's already stirred. You stretch beneath the furs, joints popping like cold beans in a pan. The morning air smells of peat smoke, old bread, and something faintly sweet. You sit up, blinking slowly. Your wife is near the hearth, crouched low, humming a tune you remember from your mother. She's not spinning today. She's pouring something into wooden cups. You catch the scent. Spiced mead. It's not a festival. It's not a wedding. It's not even a particularly good fishing day. But sometimes the best reason to warm a little honeyed brew is no reason at all. She hands you a cup and says nothing. You nod in the sacred Viking gesture of appreciation. A grunt, a raised brow, and an immediate sip. The mead is warm, not hot, sweet but not syrupy. There's a note of clove in it, or maybe just old cinnamon. Either way, it hits the back of your throat like a friendly hand on the shoulder. Comfort in drinkable form. You take a deep breath and look around. The children are still asleep, limbs sprawled across the furs like kelp tossed on shore. The goat is curled up near the door, for once not chewing anything. Even the house feels more relaxed, like it's taken a deep breath after several stormy days. You sip again and let the warmth spread. Eventually, your wife speaks. "Shall we sing?" You nod. It's not uncommon. Singing is how stories pass from generation to generation. It's how long nights are made shorter and how children learn to remember who they are. And in the morning, when the village is quiet and the sea hasn't started demanding your attention, singing just feels right. You begin with something old, an ancestral lullaby. The melody rises slow and low, a droning tune that fits the cadence of waves and wool spinning. Your voice is rusty at first, but it warms with each note, like a boat slipping smoothly into calm water. Your wife joins in, her voice steadier, sweeter. The harmonies intertwine like threads on a loom. You sing of boats with dragon heads, of golden fields that never rot, of gods who fall in love with mortals and turn into bears to escape the awkwardness. The goat perks up and bleats along at one point. You stop to glare. It stops. One of the children stirs, blinking slowly at the sound. Another rolls over and murmurs something about the fish king before sinking back into dreams. You smile. The song changes. Now something playful about a fisherman so lazy he trained his dog to row. You add ridiculous hand gestures and your wife shakes her head but keeps singing. You forget the exact words halfway through, but fill the gaps with whistles. The goat appears delighted. Singing gives way to humming, humming to silence. You sip the last of your mead and set the cup aside. Outside, the sky has lightened to a soft silver. Rain threatens but hasn't yet made up its mind. You step out into the early light, stretching your arms, breathing deep. You hear distant voices, others waking. A hammer, a laugh, the sound of life continuing. You walk down toward the docks, slowly barefoot, feeling the cold earth under your soles. The tide is high, the boats bobbing gently, their ropes creaking like sleepy knees. You pause beside yours, running a hand along the edge. The salt has left a white crust. A gull cackles somewhere overhead. You sit on an overturned crate and watch the mist roll across the water. In moments like this, it's hard to imagine the drama of raids, of long voyages and battles and glory. There's just the sea, the boat, the soft ache in your shoulders, and the taste of honey still lingering on your tongue. You hum the song again, quiet now, just for you. Historians still debate how deeply music wove through daily Viking life. Some argue it was sacred, saved for ceremonies. Others believe it saturated every corner of life, echoing from longhouses, bouncing across fields, whispered into sails. You believe in the latter, because when everything is soaked, when your fishnets tangle, when the goat knocks over the stew pot, and even when the shark ferments too hard, a song is still there, waiting. And sometimes it sings you back to yourself. The sky is a pale grey, now bright, but muted like a wool blanket pulled halfway back. The kind of light that makes the sea look colder than it actually is, and it's already plenty cold. You rise from your seat on the crate and wander along the shore, hands deep in your cloak breath, puffing small clouds that disappear as quickly as your memory of why you came out here in the first place. Driftwood crunches underfoot. You pass a familiar rock shaped like a flattened bread loaf, and just beyond it you spot something odd, a small bundle of seaweed tied around a bone charm staked into the sand with a stick. Ah, a ward. Someone's been leaving tokens for the sea spirits again. You crouch down beside it, careful not to disturb anything. It's a simple offering. A few shells, a carved wooden bead, and the faint trace of soot from a burned herb, probably juniper. You glance around. No one's nearby. But you suspect it's the old woman from the edge of the village, the one with eyes like storm clouds, and an uncanny ability to predict when it's going to hail, based on the smell of fish. You nod respectfully toward the charm, then rise and keep walking. Up ahead, the rocks get slippery, covered in moss and bits of shell. You step carefully, your boots, remembering the last time you fell and bruised your pride more than your hip. Somewhere out there, a fish probably still tells the story. You find a dry spot near the largest boulder and settle down again, watching the waves crash gently against the rocks. The tide is pulling back, now revealing more of the shore, bits of netting, a broken oar, and the skeleton of a long-dead boat that no one's claimed in years. Its ribs jut from the sand like the bones of something ancient and stubborn. You wonder who it belonged to. Maybe a fisherman like you, maybe a trader, maybe a dreamer who thought he could reach the far islands and instead found out what happens when ambition meets a leaky hull. You run a hand over your beard, newly braided and still a bit damp. A seagull lands nearby and regards you with open contempt as if to say, "You again." You throw a pebble, not to hit it, just to make a point. It hops once unimpressed, then waddles off. Behind you, the wind picks up, the kind of wind that whispers through pine needles and carries the scent of damp soil and hearth smoke. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. Historians still argue whether Viking fishermen believed in weather omens or simply got very good at pattern recognition. But you've known old sailors who swore the clouds could talk, who claimed the curl of a wave meant luck or loss, who kept carved whale bones by the door, not for decoration, but for listening. You return to your feet and head back inland, pausing only briefly at the bone charm again. You think about leaving something a shell, maybe, but you decide against it. You've already left enough of yourself out here today. By the time you reach the edge of the village, the clouds have thickened. Rain soon. You duck into the shed to grab the oilcloth tarp for the fish drying racks, and as you do, your hand brushes an old carving, a whale's tooth etched with spirals. It was your father's. You used to think it hummed when storms came. Maybe it still does. Maybe you've just gotten older and stopped pressing it to your ear. You step back outside and stretch the tarp across the fish racks. The cloth is stiff from salt and time, but it holds. You secure it with rope, tying knots you could do blindfolded. You probably have. As you finish, you look up to see your wife standing in the doorway holding out a dry tunic. The one with the repaired shoulder seam. Your favorite, the one that doesn't itch as much. You walk toward her and take it with a smile. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't need to. The rain starts with a soft patter like the sky clearing its throat. Back inside, the fire's been stoked again. The children are playing some quiet game involving stones and whispered rules. You settle onto the stool. You're proud of that stool now and pull the dry tunic over your head. It smells like hearth smoke and wool and the faintest hint of crushed bay leaves. The rain grows heavier outside. The roof sings softly under its weight. You close your eyes and think of the whale bones, of storm omens, of the charm in the sand, of things left behind. The fire crackles. The air is warm. You're not waiting for anything. Not now. The rain continues through the evening, soft at first, then heavier, turning the thatched roofs of the village into quiet percussion instruments. You sit by the hearth again, hands wrapped around a warm wooden mug filled with something herbal. Not mead, not soup, just hot leaves and water, and the feeling of this will do. The children are quieter now, half asleep, their game of stones having devolved into blanket forts and dramatic sighs. The goat mercifully has taken shelter beneath the awning outside its occasional snorts, letting you know it's still alive, still damp and still watching. You lean back against the wooden wall and let your thoughts wander. The fire flickers against the hearthstones, shadows dancing across the ceiling like long-forgotten ancestors, trying to tell stories in smoke. You think of the fjord, of rowing in the early hours, of the fish still drying beneath the tarp, of the whale you saw yesterday, and whether it's still out there somewhere in the dark water, gliding silently beneath the waves. A creature so massive yet invisible now, like a thought too big to hold. You think of the song your wife sang earlier, the one from her mother and her mother's mother. Songs passed down not on parchment but in memory, breath to breath beside fires like this one. It occurs to you that no one has taught you to live this life. You've just absorbed it. From weather, from wood grain, from the shape of a knot in a rope, and the way your boat feels under your feet when the wind changes. Your eyes flutter closed, then open again. The fire hums softly. You feel something shift, a subtle quietness deeper than silence, the kind that comes only when everything that could demand your attention has already gone to sleep. Your muscles unwind, your breath slows, the room stretches, softens. Across from you, your wife is spinning again, lazy, loose loops of thread now, not for work, just habit. Her hair glows in the firelight, and for a moment you remember the first time you saw her at the summer gathering. She had thrown a sandal at Bjorn for telling a joke about goats. You knew then, you were doomed. You smile. She looks up, sees you watching, and raises an eyebrow. Yes. You shake your head. Nothing. Just glad. She doesn't smile. Not exactly, but the corner of her mouth twitches. That's enough. Outside, the wind rises and falls, pulling rain sideways. The goats shift beneath the awning. You hope they're smart enough to stay dry. They aren't, but it's the thought that counts. You think about tomorrow. It'll be damp. The nets will be heavier. Your boat will need bailing. You'll probably forget to pack lunch. Again. But you'll row. You'll fish. You'll trade. You'll return to this hearth and this mug and this endless, comforting loop of salt, wood, wool, and warmth. Historians might one day write about the Vikings in great loud heroic terms about raids and sails and swords, but they'll miss this. The stillness, the quiet victories, the way your wife spins thread in the half-light while the rain sings lullabies to the roof. Your eyelids grow heavier, the fire fades to embers. You lie down on your mat, pulling the fur up to your chin. The smell of wool is all around you. Your beard rests comfortably against your collar. Your feet have finally dried. Even the ache in your shoulders feels like part of the ritual now. You take a final breath long and deep, and let go. The wind outside hums low like a lullaby written by the fjord itself. The fire gives one last crackle. The house settles, and you sleep. The room fades into quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't empty but full of crackling embers of softened breath, of slow dreams, wrapping themselves gently around your shoulders. The kind of quiet that holds you without asking anything in return. Outside, the rain softens to mist. The wind settles into a steady whisper. Somewhere in the distance, a wave breaks gently on the rocks. Not to startle, just to remind you it's there. Your body is still now warm under fur, still wearing the scent of sea salt and smoked wood. Your thoughts begin to drift, loosening like knots in old rope, slowly untangling into stillness. You imagine your boat bobbing gently in the harbour, its oars tucked inside like folded arms. Your nets are drying, your fire is low, the goat has finally gone to sleep. Everything is in its place. The stories have been told. The songs have been sung, the bread has been broken. The water, the wind, the wool, they've all done their part, and now they too rest. You don't need to hold on to anything now. Not your thoughts, not your day, not even your name. Just breathe. Soft, slow, there you go. The fjord exhales, the hearth sighs, and the fisherman, you drift quietly into sleep. You rise before dawn again, not because someone calls you, but because your body has been doing this for so many years that the sun no longer needs to knock. The house is still dark, the embers in the hearth barely glowing, and outside the wind whistles through the slats like a distant flute player who doesn't quite know the tune. You sit up slowly, blankets slipping from your shoulders, and stretch until your spine clicks in protest. There's something deeply satisfying about waking before the rest of the world. Like having a conversation with the day before it decides what kind of mood it's in. You reach for your cloak, still damp along the hem from yesterday's rain, and pull on your boots, stiff and curled slightly inward from drying too close to the fire. They grumble as you slide your feet in these boots, and you have been through many seasons together. You think they deserve a name, then again, maybe not. You're still recovering from naming that one fish last summer, and then accidentally eating it. You step outside, and the morning greets you with silence. Even the goat is still asleep, curled into itself like a furry bundle of conspiracy. The sky is a deep pre-dawn blue. The stars are fading, blinking slowly out as the east begins to glow. You wander toward the water, not to fish, not yet, just to walk. To feel the earth under your feet and listen to the stillness of a world not yet awake. The rocks beneath your boots are slick with night frost. You walk slower, more deliberately. Down at the beach, the tide is out. Pools of seawater dot the sand like tiny mirrors reflecting the soft light of the sky. Crabs scurry sideways, disturbed by your steps. You kneel and scoop a bit of seawater into your palm. Cold, sharp, alive. You remember being a boy running barefoot down this same stretch of sand, daring your friends to touch the slimy jellyfish that washed ashore. You'd spend hours here building driftwood forts and throwing stones at the waves, pretending they were sea monsters or foreign invaders. Now, the sea is no longer your playground. It is your pantry, your path, your occasional adversary, but you still love it. Even when it soaks your clothes, breaks your nets and steals your oars, you love it. You walk farther up onto the rocks. Here someone has carved runes long ago, weathered now, barely legible, but you know what they say. A name, a date, perhaps a warning, perhaps a blessing. Your grandfather said it was a prayer to Njord, god of the sea and wind. You trace the grooves with your fingers. The stone is cold, rough, real. Historians still debate the extent to which Norse villagers worship the gods in daily life. Was it symbolic, ceremonial, or embedded in every rope, knot, and hearth fire? You know your answer. Faith in your world isn't grand. It's quiet, practical. A small carved charm, a whispered name before setting sail, a rune on a rock by the sea. The wind picks up a little. You pull your cloak tighter and begin to head back. As you near the village again, smoke begins to curl upward from a few chimneys. Dogs stir. Someone calls out for a child who is already halfway up a tree. You hear the familiar clank of a bucket being dropped into a well. And from your own roof, a thud. You stop. Then another thud. A pause. Then the unmistakable sound of something dragging a wooden ladle across the roof tiles. You sigh. Goat, you mutter. You arrive just in time to see the creature peeking down over the edge, as if surprised that you're surprised. It bleats once smugly. You open the front door to find your wife already holding a broom, arms crossed, eyes skyward. Without speaking, she hands it to you. You climb the side ladder, which wobbles just enough to remind you of your mortality, and reach the roof. The goat stares at you like you've interrupted something deeply personal. You gesture with the broom. It does not move. You sit. The two of you stare at each other in silence for a while. The village wakes around you, birds chirp, a rooster tries to remember how crowing works. Eventually, the goat stands, stretches and saunters down the sloped roof toward the ladder. You blink. It hops off with the grace of a slightly drunk acrobat and trots into the yard like it meant to do that all along. You follow more slowly, climbing down rung by rung. Inside, your wife sets down 2 bowls of porridge without a word. You eat in companionable silence. Outside, the day has finally begun, and in some small stubborn way you feel like you've won. The mid-morning light cuts across the floorboards in pale gold streaks, catching the edge of your wooden spoon as you stir the coals back to life. You're not quite ready to go fishing again. Not yet. Today is one of those rare in-between days when the tide is wrong, the wind is lazy, and the fish would rather nap than swim into your net. And so, you stay ashore. Your wife suggests you make yourself useful, not with words exactly, but with a single glance at the stack of firewood, and then at the dull hatchet leaning against the wall. You sigh the universal sound of Viking husbands everywhere, and shuffle outside with the resigned dignity of a man who knows there will be splinters in his beard before lunch. The chopping block is still damp from yesterday's rain, but the logs are dry enough. You stand there a moment holding the hatchet, surveying the wood, like it's a small rebellion in need of correcting. The first swing is always a little theatrical, not for anyone else, just for yourself. A reminder that yes, you still have shoulders and yes, they still work. The hatchet sinks into the grain with a satisfying thunk. The log splits clean. You feel oddly victorious. A few more follow rhythm building. Lift, swing, split. Wood chips fly. The cold air warms around you with each motion. There's a certain pleasure in it. Brainless, repetitive, honest. You pause to flex your fingers, then glance toward the sky. A few gulls drift lazily overhead. The clouds look like they're thinking about raining again, but can't quite commit. Off in the distance, someone is calling to a chicken. The chicken does not respond. As you split another log, something small falls out from the center. an old nail rusted and curled. You hold it up curious, a leftover from some other life, perhaps a plank from a ship long burned or a cart long collapsed. You tuck it into your pocket, not because it's useful, but because it could be. After an hour or so, the woodpile has doubled, your arms are humming, and your nose is filled with the scent of fresh pine and distant fish. You dust your hands on your tunic, which is by now an abstract canvas of bark, dust, sweat, and historic goat fur. You walk back inside to find your wife kneading dough, her sleeves rolled up and her hair tied back with a bit of flax string. The smell of warm yeast and damp stone fills the air. She doesn't look up, but gestures with her elbow toward the corner. Time to sweep. You blink. I just chopped wood. She nods. Good. Now, you're warm. You sigh again, heavier this time, but grab the broom anyway. The floor is covered in all the usual suspects. Crumbs, mud, wool scraps, something that might be dried fish skin, and one of the children's wooden spinning tops lodged squarely beneath the bench. You sweep slowly, deliberately, as though the floor might reward you for good behavior. It does not. But the room grows tidier, the pile of sweepings grows larger, and you even find the missing spindle your wife had been silently resenting you for losing. You hold it up like a trophy. She glances, nods once, and returns to kneading. Historians still argue how gender roles functioned in Norse households, how strictly labor was divided, and how much day-to-day life blurred those lines. You've never given it much thought. All you know is, you fish, she bakes, and if you mess up, either someone's getting the broom. By midday, the house smells like something good. Bread, herbs, and the faintest wisp of smoke from the iron pot still warming in the corner. Your children drift in from wherever they've been, muddy, loud, hungry as always. They collapse beside the hearth like laundry, asking what's for dinner, before even removing their cloaks. You shrug. Something hot. They cheer anyway. Your wife hands you a loaf warm and heavy in your palm. The crust is crisp, the inside soft and pale. You break it into chunks, steam rising, and pass it around. You eat in silence, not because there's nothing to say, but because everyone's mouth is full and warm and satisfied. When the bread is gone, and the crumbs are claimed by the smallest hands, you lean back against the wall and exhale deeply. A rare day of rest. Not a feast, not a holiday, just a pause, a breath between storms. Outside, the wind rustles through the grass. The goat snorts and sneezes. You ignore it. You close your eyes and let your arms rest across your chest, still sore from splitting logs. The fire pops. The children squabble over a stick. Your wife hums again, something soft and familiar. And for once you think the day didn't ask much. Just warmth, wood, and bread. The sun has begun its slow crawl downward again, stretching shadows across the fields and rooftops, like a lazy cat finding the longest place to nap. You step outside after the meal, still chewing the last crumb of bread, arms crossed over your chest, belly pleasantly full. The air has that early evening chill to it, not sharp, but enough to make you pull your cloak tighter. You head toward the edge of the village, where the older men sit. Not a formal meeting, nothing carved into stone. Just a few low stools, a ring of rocks, someone once declared a council fire, and the unspoken understanding that whoever arrives first gets to complain the loudest. Today, Hror is already there, of course, wrapped in 3 cloaks like a cabbage that talks. He's poking at the fire with a stick far too long to be useful, and lecturing a very uninterested chicken. They don't make winters like they used to, he says, without looking up. You take your seat. Last winter cracked my fishing oar in half. He shrugs. That was a soft winter. You nod. Mild frostbite. Only lost the 1 toenail. Hror seems disappointed. You weren't fully maimed. He turns back to his fire, poking. A third man joins Snorri with his usual limp and his spectacularly mismatched socks. He sits down without a word and offers a flask. You take it, sniff it. Something fermented, something bold, something that smells vaguely of despair and wild berries. You sip. It burns in a friendly way. Conversation continues like this for a while. Nothing urgent, nothing important, just the usual topics. Fishing ghosts, whether Bjorn is cursed, why the new roof on the grain hut creaks when there's no wind. Every so often, someone gestures vaguely toward the fjord, as if waiting for it to produce answers. You watch the smoke rise from the small fire curling into the air and vanishing like half-formed thoughts. Your mind drifts. You think about the seasons, about how the sea changes color from spring to fall, about how your children are growing faster than the firewood pile, about how someday maybe they'll tell stories about you sitting here wrapped in your cloak, arguing with Raw over whether seals can be reasoned with. Someone brings up the old stories again. The one about the drowned village to the north where the houses still stand beneath the waves, perfectly preserved, watched over by silent fish, and one suspiciously smart octopus. You know the tale, everyone does. It's ridiculous. And yet, you feel the chill of the water just thinking about it. Hraw insists he saw the rooftops once during an extremely low tide. You remind him he also once claimed he saw a thunder god in the clouds and tried to duel it with a mop. The laughter that follows is the best part of the evening. Not loud, not forced, just old voices settling into familiar grooves like stones polished by the tide. Historians still debate whether these informal gatherings were vital political forums or just excuses for tired men to sit near fire and pretend they weren't hiding from chores. You suspect both are true. Sometimes wisdom sounds like silence. Sometimes it sounds like grumbling about goats. Eventually, the fire burns low. The flask makes one last round. Someone coughs. Someone stretches. The conversation fades into contented quiet. You rise first, brushing ash from your cloak. The others grunt their goodbyes. You walk slowly back toward your house, the path worn smooth by years of footsteps just like yours. As you approach the door, the glow of the hearth inside calls to you. You hear the soft hum of your wife's voice, a lullaby meant for no one in particular. The children's shapes shift under the blankets. The goat snores faintly in the corner, curled up like it owns the house. You step inside, close the door gently behind you, and hang your cloak on the same wooden peg it's always hung from. You stand there a moment, just listening. Fire, wool, quiet breathing. You're home. No saga will be written about tonight, but if there's a heaven for fishermen, you think it probably feels something like this. You wake to the sound of soft splashing, not ocean waves, not rain, but the unmistakable rhythm of someone washing something just outside the house. You sit up slowly, rubbing your face, your fingers, meeting the familiar scruff of your beard, now slightly matted on one side from a long night pressed against wool. The hearth fire has burned down to low embers, still warm enough to take the chill off the air. The light seeping through the wooden slats of the shutters is pale and filtered, the kind of light that suggests the day hasn't made up its mind yet. Will it rain? Will the sun break through? You suspect, both in confusing order. You shuffle to the door and push it open with a grunt. Your youngest child is kneeling by the barrel outside, sleeves rolled up to the elbows, arms submerged as she carefully washes her doll, a misshapen bundle of cloth and straw that has somehow survived 4 winters, 3 dogs and a seagull, incident that is still whispered about. She looks up. She needed a bath, she explains solemnly. You nod because what else is there to say? You walk past her toward the water trough, splash your face, and let the freezing shock wake you properly. Then dripping and snorting, you blink at the morning. It's quiet, oddly so. You glance toward the harbour and notice the water is too still. No breeze, no birds, no sails in the distance. Even the goat is standing still, staring not at you but at the horizon like it knows something. That's never a good sign. You eat a quick breakfast, cold bread, a smear of old butter, and a cup of something called herbal water that tastes suspiciously like boiled bark. Then you step back outside and join a few neighbours already gathering along the beach. There's fog, someone says, pointing. There's always fog, someone replies. No, but this one's different. And indeed it is. Rolling in slowly from the sea is a thick, low-lying bank of mist, heavier than usual, tinged slightly yellow at the edges. It moves like it's choosing where to go. You tighten your cloak and step forward. Hroar is already there, arms crossed, muttering something about omens and bad herring. Bjorn arrives a few moments later, holding his spear for no reason other than the fog looks like it needs challenging. You stand shoulder to shoulder, squinting into the shifting mist. Shapes form, disappear, reform. A trick of the light, or the gods playing games again. And then, just barely you see it. A boat. A long, low silhouette drifting slowly through the fog. No sail, no oars moving, just gliding. You feel a ripple of unease pass through the gathered villagers. No one speaks. The boat draws closer enough now to see the carved dragon head on the prow, old, chipped, but still fierce. The hull is scarred, empty. It makes no sound. It reaches the shore and gently bumps against the rocks. Not a soul on board. Bjorn takes a tentative step forward, spear raised. Well, that's not ominous at all. You glance at him. Don't poke it. He shrugs. I always poke it. He does. The boat rocks slightly. Nothing happens. Slowly, the crowd inches forward. Inside the boat, a pile of rope, 2 empty barrels, a rusted lantern, and a single carved whalebone laid across the bench. Your breath catches. Not fear, just familiarity. You've seen a whalebone like that before. At the edge of the forest, at the old shrine, it's the same shape, same spiraled grooves. Someone murmurs, "It's one of ours." But no one knows who. Historians might call this a tale of superstition. They'll say villagers saw ghosts in fog omens in driftwood, but standing there staring at the boat that arrived without a rower, with a charm placed just so you feel something hum in your ribs. A quiet recognition. The sea has returned something. You and Bjorn haul the boat farther ashore. It's heavier than it looks. You tie it up out of habit more than need. The village returns slowly to itself. Chorus. Resume. Nets are checked. Wood is chopped. But the fog doesn't fully lift, and no one jokes as loudly today. Back home, you sit by the hearth and turn the whalebone in your hands. You think about the sea, about what it gives, about what it keeps, and what it sometimes decides to send back. The strange boat stays tied up at the edge of the village for 3 days. No one moves it, no one claims it, and no one, despite plenty of Viking bravado, dares to take it out again. It sits like a quiet question rocking gently in the shallow surf as if waiting for someone to ask the right thing. You pass it each morning on your way to check the drying racks. It creaks sometimes when there's no wind. You've stopped trying to explain that. Some things don't ask for understanding. They just exist like fog, like tides, like the goat's unpredictable climbing schedule. Today you decide to ignore the boat entirely. You have other things to do. The fish need salting. You lift the wooden lid off the salt barrel near your shed and immediately wish you hadn't. The smell is potent. It's not bad exactly, just deeply aggressive, like the sea itself decided to settle a grudge inside your nose. You reach in and begin scooping handfuls of coarse white crystals, spreading them over the layered fish you've set in a clay trough. The salt sticks to your fingers, crusting into the tiny cuts left by yesterday's net mending. You wince a little but keep working. Salt is life here. It preserves your food cures, your meat keeps the village fed through the worst of winter. It also ruins your boots and leaves a fine dusting on every surface you own, but no one's perfect. You hum as you work the same old tune your father used to sing, the one about a fisherman who tried to salt the entire ocean so he'd never run out of herring. It ends with him being swept away by a jealous wave. You always liked that part. As you pack the layers tight, fish salt, you hear footsteps behind you. It's Snorri. He's holding a bundle of herbs and wearing an expression that suggests either concern or constipation. With Snorri, it's hard to tell. "Thought you might want these," he says, dropping the herbs beside your fish trough. "For the drying racks? Keeps the flies away." You nod. "Thanks." He hesitates, then adds, "You think the boat's cursed." You glance toward the shore. "I think it's empty." "Same thing sometimes." You both fall into silence. He watches you work for a moment, then picks up a small wooden stool and sits nearby. You keep salting. He starts carving something with his pocket knife. It's not exactly companionship, but it's close enough. After a while, he speaks again. You ever wonder what it's like? Out there. He gestures vaguely toward the horizon. Beyond the fjord, past the islands. You pause. I've wondered. Doesn't mean I want to find out. Why not? You look at your hands crusted with salt, scratched, weathered. The hands of someone who knows what it means to live in one place for a long time. Because everything I need is here, you say simply. Snorri nods, then carves in silence again. Historians still argue about how adventurous the average Norseman really was. Were they all eager explorers? Or did most simply want their fires to stay warm, their boats to float, and their goats to stay off the roof? You know which one you are. When the fish are salted and the trough is full, you cover it with a plank and secure the lid with a few smooth stones. You stretch your back and shake the salt from your sleeves. Snorri stands too. Suppose I should go check my traps. You nod. Suppose I should sweep the porch. He leaves with a wave. You linger for a moment, breathing in the briny air, letting it settle into your lungs like a memory. Later that evening, as the sun begins its slow descent, you stand on the porch with your broom pushing dust and crumbs into neat little piles. The goat watches you from beneath the eaves, chewing something that was probably part of your roof. Your wife is inside boiling something that smells like cabbage and smoked fish. The children are arguing about whether trolls can swim. You listen, smiling, and then you hear it. The boat. Just one soft creak like a sigh. You look down the slope toward the shore. The boat is still there, still tied, still empty. But it doesn't feel quite the same. You step back inside and close the door. Some questions don't need answers tonight. It's wash day, which means two things. Every piece of fabric in the house is now flapping on lines like surrendered battle flags, and you're going to get wet whether you help or not. You decide to help, sort of. You start by carrying the heavy tub of water from the well to the wash station behind the house. It's sloshing, it's cold, it's heavy, and it was definitely fuller when you started. The chickens give you a wide berth, either out of respect or because you once accidentally splashed one and it hasn't forgiven you. Your wife is already knee-deep in linen scrubbing, like she's angry at stains that insulted her ancestors. She hands you a wooden paddle and points toward a separate bucket filled with socks, rags, and what you suspect used to be a curtain. You want me to beat them, you ask. Yes, she says, and this time, try not to hit your own foot. You begin. It's oddly satisfying, this rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack. A simple task, no fish guts involved, just water, soap, and the gentle release of tension as fabric smacks wood. You even start humming a tune, until the paddle slips and splashes half the tub back into your lap. Your wife doesn't even look up. She just mutters, "Told you." You return to the task with slightly more dignity and slightly less dry clothing. Eventually the sun breaks through the clouds, warm and sudden, and the mood shifts. The damp grass sparkles. The sheets ripple in the breeze. You pause to stretch your back and glance up at the lines of drying fabric tunic, sleeves waving lazily, trousers doing their best impressions of windsocks. One of the kids runs through ducks under the lines and trips on the goat, who has chosen this exact moment to nap in the center of the yard. There's a squawk, a shout, and then laughter. No one's hurt. The goat looks vaguely satisfied. Historians often gloss over days like this. There are no raids, no royal decrees, no political marriages, just laundry, just sunshine, just domestic chaos wrapped in steam and soap bubbles. You move on to rinsing. The water has gone cloudy, flecks of ash and dirt floating on the surface, like tiny boats with nowhere to go. You pour it onto the vegetable patch, no waste not here, and start fresh. Later, your wife joins you at the lines, both of you pinning up tunics side by side. You race unofficially. She wins, of course. She always does. You pretend you let her. The last of the fabric hung you. Both stand there a moment, admiring your work. The wind picks up, billowing the sheets like sails. You imagine the whole house lifting off, carried away over the fjord. Think I could tie one of these to my fishing boat, you joke. She snorts. Not unless you plan to fly to the bottom. The sun warms your face. Your sleeves are soaked. Your feet are muddy. And yet there's something lovely about it all. You sit on the chopping block, letting your hands dry in the breeze. You pick up a damp sock and begin wringing it out slowly. Your wife sits beside you, her braid trailing down her shoulder, like a rope left on deck. Do you remember the flood, she asks, suddenly. You nod. Everyone does. A few years back, the river swelled higher than anyone had seen. Half the village was ankle deep for days. You lost 3 baskets of fish and a perfectly good broom. She's quiet a moment. I remember thinking, we'd never dry out again. You look around, at the fluttering linen, the steaming buckets, the goat now chewing on a washcloth. Looks like we did, you say. She leans her head lightly on your shoulder. You sit there a while, the two of you held in place by wet socks and warm sunlight. The rest of the afternoon unfolds gently. The children take turns, chasing each other around the house, clothesline obstacle course included. Someone down the hill burns their stew and blames the fire spirits. Bjorn drops by to offer help, which you wisely decline. By sunset, the linens are dry, the buckets are emptied, and the goat has been shooed out of the tub for the 4th time. You gather the clothes in baskets and carry them inside, the scent of soap and wind trailing behind you. That night, as you curl into your furs, your tunic smells like sunshine. Your hands smell like ash and lye. Your shoulders ache in that satisfying way that says, you worked today but not too hard. Outside, the stars return, the fjord sleeps, and your sheets for once are clean. You wake early the next morning to the sound of hooves, slow, deliberate, and just outside your window. That can mean only one thing. The tax collector has arrived. You groan softly, not because you've done anything wrong, but because no one enjoys arithmetic before breakfast. You swing your legs out of bed and stretch joints crackling like old wood. Your wife is already up baking flatbread. The children have vanished, possibly hiding under something. Even the goat has the good sense to stay quiet. You pull on your tunic and step outside, blinking into the early sun. There he is. Olaf, the counter, tall, thin, and very fond of tiny notes. He wears a woolen cap that makes his head look like a turnip and carries a wax tablet like it's a holy relic. He nods at you gravely. You're up late. You glance at the sun. It's barely risen. He scribbles something, probably late. Tax in your part of the world isn't about coins, really. It's about goods. How many barrels of dried fish? How many bundles of wool? How many days of labor you owe the local chieftain? It's rarely fair, always confusing, and somehow always slightly more than you remember agreeing to. Today Olaf wants fish. You lead him to your shed and show him the barrels. He counts them with exaggerated care, tapping each one like it might explode. He mutters. 3 barrels less than last year. That's because last year I worked through the winter, you reply. Nearly froze off my beard. Still, he says and writes something down. You resist the urge to salt him and pack him in a barrel. Instead, you offer a basket of dried eels as a goodwill bonus. He eyes them with suspicion but eventually accepts. Fine, he says, but next year 4 barrels. Historians still argue whether taxmen in Viking societies were more respected or reviled. Some see them as crucial administrators. Others believe they were tolerated like lice, unpleasant but hard to get rid of without burning something. Once Olaf leaves, you release a breath you didn't realize you were holding. The rest of the village begins to stir, people peeking out of homes to see if the coast is clear. It's like watching prairie dogs cautiously emerge after a storm. You gather your tools and head toward the shore. Tax or no tax, the fish still need catching. At the dock, you notice that the strange boat is gone. Not broken, not beached, just not there. You look around. No tracks, no drag marks. just smooth sand and lapping waves. You squint toward the horizon. Nothing. It's probably best not to think too hard about it. Instead, you push your own boat into the water and climb aboard. The sun is higher now, gilding the surface of the fjord with a shimmer that reminds you of molten metal. You dip your oar and begin rowing. Halfway out, you pause. The water is unusually calm. You cast your line and wait. The minutes stretch like soft dough. A seabird cries overhead, its wings cutting the sky. You smell brine, wood tar, and something vaguely floral, wild rosemary from the hills, perhaps. A tug on the line. You pull. It's a fat cod, silver and thrashing. You smile. Perhaps the tax gods were appeased after all. Back on shore, you gut the fish with practiced hands, tossing the offal to the tide. Gulls descend in a flurry of feathers and noise, squabbling over scraps like drunk poets over an unfinished saga. You haul your catch toward the drying racks, nodding to neighbours as you pass. Everyone looks a little lighter now that Olaf's gone. Someone's even playing a lyre. It's out of tune, but the effort is appreciated. That afternoon, you visit the barter market at the village centre. Stalls are set up with woven mats, traded goods, and hopeful haggling. You trade 2 eels for a sack of barley. The woman you trade with throws in a dried apple slice for your goat. You eat it yourself. The goat can deal. You linger a while listening to gossip. Apparently someone saw the strange boat out past the skerries, drifting empty, glowing faintly in the moonlight. You shrug. Maybe it's a ghost. Maybe it's just a very committed prank. You buy a new knife anyway, just in case. Evening falls slow and golden. The fjord blushes pink. You sit on a smooth rock near your house, carving a whistle from driftwood. Your youngest joins you, watching with wide eyes. "What's that for?" they ask. "Calling sea spirits," you reply, grinning. They gasp. You wink. By nightfall, the whistle doesn't work. It makes a noise like a dying duck. But your child laughs and claps anyway. You promise to try again tomorrow. Inside, the hearth glows. Your wife has made stew. The goat has stolen half a turnip and refuses to give it back. You eat, stretch, and rest. Another day survived. Another taxman avoided, barely. The moon is full tonight, so full it spills across the rooftops like milk over a sleepy table. Its light pours through the cracks in your shutters, touching everything in your home with a gentle silvery glow. You lie on your straw bed, not quite asleep. The fire's embers still pulse orange in the hearth, and the walls creak now and then with the sounds of timber settling. The kind of creaks that would be unsettling if they weren't so familiar. You've heard them every night of your life. But tonight, something tugs at you. Not fear, not dread, just restlessness. You slip from bed quietly, careful not to wake your wife or the goat who is currently using a woolen sock as a pillow. Your feet touch the cool floor, and you pad silently to the door. Outside, the world is still, even the sea has gone quiet. The wind holds its breath. You walk barefoot down to the water, guided by the moon's shimmer on the path. The grass whispers against your ankle. Somewhere in the distance, a fox yips once, then silence again. You reach the shore and stop. There it is. The strange boat. It's back. Tied to the same rock. Still no footprints, no drag marks. Just there. The moonlight catches its carved prow, and this time you notice something new. A set of runes etched along the rim. Faint, faded, old. You kneel, trace them with your finger. They don't make sense. Not in the way runes usually do. They're old, possibly older than your grandfather's grandfather. Some shapes you recognize. Others you've only seen once, carved into a standing stone buried deep in the woods, where no one dares to linger. You sit in the sand, suddenly aware of the cold against your skin. The boat doesn't move with the waves. It seems planted like a tree rooted to something below. Historians still argue whether Norse seafarers believed in ghost ships, or whether such tales emerged later from anxious Christian scribes who needed every ripple explained. You believe in stories that linger. Whether they come from the gods or the gulls, you treat them with the same respect. You stay there a while, just watching. Eventually, you hear footsteps. Light, careful. You turn. It's your oldest child. They hold a blanket in one hand, rubbing sleep from their eyes with the other. Couldn't sleep, you ask? They nod and sit beside you. You both stare at the boat. They don't ask what it is. Children have a way of knowing when not to ask. Instead, they lean against your shoulder blanket tucked around both of you. You wrap an arm around them. The waves whisper again very softly. You tell your child an old story, not one of war or gods, but one about a fisherman who tried to catch the moon using only a net made of goose feathers. He never did catch it, of course, but in the end he became the tide, always reaching upward. They like that one. You both sit there until the sky starts to lighten behind the mountains, the soft grey of early dawn blooming like ink in water. When you finally rise, the boat is gone again. No sound, no sign, just wet sand and your footprints. Your child doesn't mention it again, and neither do you. But that day, they carve a boat from driftwood, small, lopsided, but strangely elegant. They tie a string to it and set it adrift in a puddle, watching it sail in tight circles. At dinner, your wife asks about the shape. Why the dragon head? Your child shrugs. It just felt right. And that's all they say. Later, you store the tiny boat on a shelf near the hearth, next to a stone from the beach and the broken tooth of a cod that once bit your thumb. It sits there, a quiet thing, like a memory no one talks about but no one forgets either. The stars rise again. The moon follows, and you sleep soundly. Mostly, morning returns, like it always does, but with a kind of softness that feels different. You wake without the usual ache in your back. No goat chewing your sleeve, no squabbling kids, not even the crows, just stillness. A hush. You sit up slowly and glance around the room. Your wife is already gone, likely tending the fire or checking on the bread. But there's no rush today. You feel that in your bones. It's the first day in weeks without rain, frost, or visitors. No markets, no taxman, no errands. Just a slow, wide-open day. You step outside and stretch. The fjord is wrapped in a misty shawl, and the grass underfoot is still damp with dew. The mountains seem to whisper behind the clouds. You decide to spend the morning mending nets. Not because you have to, but because it feels right. There's something calming in the repetition. Twist, not check. Twist again. You settle near the drying racks, spread the tangle in your lap and begin. The air smells of salt and damp wool. Somewhere behind you the neighbour's dog barks once, then goes back to napping. You let your mind wander. You remember your own father sitting just like this, showing you how to patch a torn loop with patient hands and almost no words. You remember how he smelled like smoke and fish oil, and how his fingers moved with quiet certainty. And you wonder, when did your own hand start looking like his? Historians still argue whether Viking fishing villages like yours were driven more by necessity or tradition, but you know the truth. It was both. Fish fed you, yes, but fishing gave you rhythm, and rhythm made you whole. A boy walks by carrying a basket of seaweed. He nods. You nod. The seaweed is for his family's roof layered under turf to trap heat and keep out rain. It's a trick learned from someone's grandmother's grandmother. No one remembers who, but it works. You hear voices further down the path, women trading gossip about a neighbour's goat that climbed onto a roof again. Laughter follows. The same goat did it last week. It's becoming something of a legend. By midday you set the net aside, satisfied. Your stomach growls. Inside, your wife has laid out a modest meal: dried fish with mustard seeds, black bread, and some surprisingly sweet parsnip stew. You both eat in comfortable silence, occasionally raising an eyebrow at the children's increasingly elaborate tales of what the cat did or didn't drag in. Later, you decide to visit the hillside grove. It's not far, just past the last row of birch trees up a narrow path, worn smooth by time and bare feet. The grove isn't sacred in any official way, but people treat it like it is. You bring a carved charm in your pocket, just a small thing, something you made from driftwood during a storm last season. It's shaped like a fish, but also vaguely like a leaf. You never could decide. When you reach the grove, you find it quiet, except for the hum of bees near the heather. A few wildflowers have bloomed early, defying the chill. You place the charm at the base of a mossy rock, nestling it among others left by other hands over the years. Some are simple, some are elaborate. One is carved in the shape of a pregnant woman worn nearly faceless by rain. You linger a moment touching the stone. You don't make a wish. You don't speak. You just remember. When you return home, the children are stacking flat stones by the hearth, trying to make a tower taller than the goat's head. The goat is unimpressed. Your wife is humming as she spins wool, the spindle dancing between her fingers like magic. And for a moment, time folds in on itself. You see it all. The past, the now, the not yet. Your home, your people, your sea. You lie down early that night, heavy with the kind of peace that doesn't ask questions. And before you close your eyes, you glance once toward the dark corner of the room where the tiny driftwood boat sits gathering dust and dreams. It hasn't moved, but you still watch it just in case. The sky opens in a soft grey wash, neither bright nor dark, just the kind of overcast that cradles your village in a hush. You stir slowly, not because something wakes you, but because your body knows today marks a shift. It's the last fishing day before the long ice sets in. Not the permanent winter, no, that's still some weeks away, but the signs are gathering. Birds flying lower, seals vanishing from the bay, and the eel traps empty 3 days in a row. You rise before the sun, quietly, carefully. Your wife has already packed a small sack. Flatbread wrapped in cloth, dried herring, a flask of goat milk with clumps of honey at the bottom if you shake it right. You kiss her temple. She pretends not to notice, but you see her mouth twitch at the corners. Outside, the air bites not cruelly, just enough to remind you to move with purpose. The boat creaks as you untie it, the oarlocks cold under your fingers. You push off from shore with a practiced grunt. The fjord opens before you like a promise, and the world fades behind you. The water is calmer than expected, almost glass-like. You row slowly, not rushing to any particular spot. This trip isn't about the catch. It's about tradition. A farewell for the season. About halfway across, you pause to look back. Your home is a smudge of smoke and turf. You think about the goat, probably chewing the same sock again. You think about your youngest child who once asked if fish sleep with their eyes open. You told them yes, but only because the sea doesn't allow dreams. Historians still argue whether Viking fishermen developed true sonar-like knowledge of fish migration, or if they simply moved by instinct passed down over generations. You prefer to believe it's a bit of both, that the sea teaches and the people listen. You drop a simple line over the side. No net today, just you, the line and the silence. Nothing bites for a while. That's fine. You're not here for the fish. The fog begins to roll in from the west, thick and slow. You don't worry. You know these waters. Every rock, every hidden reef, every current that pulls too fast near the mouth of the bay. As you wait, you hum an old tune, something your mother used to sing when she baked flatbread with berries crushed inside. The song has no words anymore, just syllables and sounds and breath. And then, a tug. Sharp, clean,